Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to Pink Turns Purple. I've got an amazing thriver for you guys at this moment. But before we get started, before I introduce her and tell you all about her amazingness, I want to make sure that you remember that you can share this email directly with anybody you want to. Just hit forward. And also encourage you to have your friends and family register so that they can get all the emails and that they can get all the information, all the tips, all the support that we are offering to help survivors move to a place of thriving. And of course, we want you to please donate. Help us make an impact on the African American community in regards to domestic violence. All you have to do is buy a tea, buy a book, buy a tea book combo, or you can just donate directly. It's all found at bit.ly /pink turns purple. bit.ly /pink turns purple, right? So let's just get right into who I have for you. And that is the thriver by the name of Nicole. Say hi to Nicole.
Hello.
Hello. So before she gets started, let me let you know who Nicole is. Nicole Lawson is an African-American singer, speaker, actor, writer, and entrepreneur. As a successful single mother and survivor of sexual and domestic abuse, she is passionate about shining hope on other survivors and using her platform to teach ambitious single mothers how to use their God-given abilities to survive and thrive. I'm excited. I don't know about y'all, but I'm excited. So let's just get right into it. Tell us exactly your domestic violence story.
Okay, so I think it's important, first of all, to share that domestic violence, a lot of times when you hear those words, you think of just beating and killing. And people don't understand that there are so many different forms of it. It's not just physical, it is emotional, it is verbal, it is financial, it's social, and there are so many women affected by it. And I hope that by sharing a couple of my experiences and how it's affected my life and affected the lives of people around me, that it could be a wake-up call. So there's a couple different stories, and I'm going to just briefly touch on a few. One of the most impactful for me in the way that it affected my life was when a couple was attending my parents' church, and we had no idea. We had no idea that what was going on behind closed doors until the wife started to have a couple of conversations with my parents and counseling and things like that. And unfortunately, long story short with that, when she decided to leave her husband because he was being physically abusive to her, unfortunately, he found her and he shot and killed her. And it really shook the foundation of the church. It shook a lot of us, and of course it made us all just kind of question ourselves, what could we have done, and how could we have noticed the signs, and it made us to start to look for signs and going forward to make sure that if we ever saw any signs of it, that we could try to intervene on a different level. How it's affected my life, unfortunately, there's been a couple instances in my life where it directly affected me. I was dating a guy well over 10 years ago, and we had an altercation because he was drunk, and I refused to give him the car keys because he was my ride. And when I refused to give him the car keys, I remember we were kind of back and forth, verbally arguing, and I could tell that he was getting really upset. So I took off kind of in a fast walk away from him, and he started to get aggressive. So I was running from him, and I remember and we were outside of a club at the time. Thank God the tape never surfaced. But we were outside of a club at that time, and when I got close to this kind of like little wall thing that you stand up to, when he approached me, he picked me up and he threw me, like body slammed me over the wall. And this was during a Halloween party, so I thought I was super cute in my little outfit, but there's nothing cute about getting up and literally your face running with blood. Not good at all. And I remember at that time being much younger, kind of brushing it off as, oh, he was just drunk for whatever reason, and forgiving him and continuing to date him for a little while. But those little things kind of set a precedence in my life of me allowing me to accept excuses, blowing things off, having those things can erode your self-esteem and kind of set this pattern. It's like a negative snowball effect that can lead up to other things. So I remember my second husband, during dating or being with him, there were some signs during dating that I ignored because it wasn't just straightforward in your face. He never put his hands on me. But during the time of dating, during the time of our marriage, having situations that were just really psychologically and emotionally damaging, if I didn't comply, and that was his favorite word to use with me. He was a police officer. So, if I didn't comply, home, or he would leave the big shotgun out on the kitchen table, and just intimidation type tactics, or threatening, because he knew my situation, and if I left, I didn't have too many options. So threatening to basically have me and my kids just be out. If at one time we had an argument where he literally started taking my clothes out the closet and throwing them outside. And all those things, they do something to your self-esteem. They continue to just diminish it. They make you question yourself, what did I do to deserve this? How can I avoid, his behavior? So there was a period of time, really long period of time, where I held myself responsible for other people's behavior toward me. The wake-up call was within the past year or so, having a situation with someone where, anger really got the best, unfortunately, of both of us. And I lost. I did not put my hands on this gentleman, and I can't say, legally, because I had a concussion and don't have any memory. So I can't say that he put his hands on me, but I can say that it caused the most physical damage I ever received in my life. I wound up, being unconscious, and waking up and having to, we had to go to the hospital, and my face was really messed up, and I had 9 stitches. So 3 here, 3 here, and 3 here. And I think that was my final wake-up call, where I knew that I almost lost my life. And I've been around and I've seen so many stories of domestic violence before. And until that moment, none of it seemed really, really real until you're, the doctor's telling you, that your skull's is broken in 2 places, that you had a concussion. This is, it could be long-term brain damage, and making you go back over exactly what happened, and you not even having any memory. That changed my life, and I think it kind of broke something inside of me that made me finally decide that I need to start looking at every single sign and not ignore every single sign that leads up to this. After having a pattern of being in so many relationships that are unhealthy, that almost cost me my life, ultimately, I decided to start to look at not what is it that these other people are doing to me, but what am I doing to me, and what is my responsibility for still being in these situations that are unhealthy? What am I teaching people? How am I teaching them to treat me? And what can I do to go forward in a way that's healthy? Because through that, I learned, through counseling and through other things, that, self-love, self-confidence, and all that is an abuse repellent. So really taking that to heart has been my thing going forward, and not demonizing, these other people, because, there's a saying, for the grace of God, there go I. It could have been me being the aggressor at any given moment. Everybody's got their crosses to bear. That, wasn't mine. So it wasn't about me demonizing anybody else. It was about me deciding, okay, what can I do to control the narrative of my life?
I get it. I totally get it. And I a theme that I am constantly talking about is taking your power back. and when you say, what can I do to change the narrative of my life? Mm-hmm. I think that becomes the ultimate question whenever we're we're in any kind of situation, especially when we're finding ourselves in a repeat cycle of abuse. You know, it's like, okay, at some point, I've got to take control of this, and I got to figure out what I got to do to change it, because there's a reason why I've attracted this abuser, and then that abuser, and then this abuser. You know, is there a sign on my forehead? Like, what is it about me that's attracting this? So I think that that's definitely, you know, an eye-opening experience that we kind of all have to get to at some point. But I want to back up a little bit. And you were saying how you kind of brushed it off. You know, when you had the first incident at the club and you're like, oh, he was just drunk. Like, it's not really abuse, and he didn't mean to hurt me.
Yeah, I mean, in this culture, you see couples, and it happens so much, you know, the play fighting, the I don't know if it's called jousting back and forth, the throwing jabs, you know, things like that. The verbiage, you know, nowadays the word bitch is almost synonymous with women. So I think that I, along with probably hundreds of thousands of other people, allowed myself to become desensitized to the early signs of abuse, which are just as dangerous. So, and it's almost like it's a part of our culture nowadays, you know, even saying stuff like, you know, I wish you would, I'm going to kick your ass. And I don't know if you'll need to edit the words or not.
No, you're okay. You're okay. We keep it real.
And women and men, we say it. And of course we don't always mean it, but we say these things. And you don't realize that everything you say is so powerful. We're not so conscious about those little things that we do that really aren't so little, because it creates this environment where later on the stuff that you're saying is going to manifest. And again, it can happen in any relationship. That's where it begins, with that type of stuff.
Right. And I think of all the times when I've talked to women and, you know, they just like, he just changed and he just became this new person. And then when we sit and when we start to talk and we start to talk about the little things that, you know, well, how was he in this situation? Or what was it like with this? So, and then it starts to come out. No, he was always this way. I just ignored it, or I pacified it, or I brushed it off until something major happened and I couldn't ignore it anymore. And I think the hardest part about that is
that big aha moment.
Right. And I think for a lot of women, even myself included, I think the hardest part is admitting that we ignored.
You know, it was really hard for me to decide to publicly talk about that, but I felt like I wasn't being genuine to any people who support me, who follow me. I'm never going to say fan, because I'm not this A-list celebrity. But I have a community of people who support me, who listen to my music, who watch me perform, blah, blah, blah. And so how could I talk about everything else but be quiet about that? I felt like I owed it to myself. I owed it to my community to come out and to openly discuss it. And, you know, being a person of faith, there is this scripture that talks about how you're overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of your the word of your testimony. It takes both. And it's true. No matter what religion you believe in or none, I think we could all agree that when you open your mouth and give your testimony about something, there's this liberty, there's this freedom, there's this power that comes along with that. It's those things that you refuse to openly discuss. Those are the things that are going to continue to conquer you, and you can't conquer it. So I felt like me being open about this is me making myself accountable to the universe, making myself accountable to myself and to everybody who hears it, that, you know what, this is something I have struggled with. And this is something that I'm taking a stand to. I'm making a decision that in this area of my life, I'm going forward healthy from now on. And so now everybody knows it. So now I have to, I have to do it. So, and I think it's also important to stop, because people will comment on my page later on, like they've done, or inbox me, that it's not just men, it's women too. I have a very close relative, and it's not my story to say, so I'm not going to say who it is. But I'll never forget when he sent me his, you know, paperwork, that he was a domestic violence victim. His wife, when she would get into a rage, she would swing, she would punch, she would hit him. And it put him in this terrible position, because, he's muscle and really in shape, and he's much bigger. So what could he do? The only thing he could do was, try to push her away, lock himself in the bedroom, put her in a therapeutic hold. I think that's what it's called when you restrain someone, to calm them down. And anything that he did, in defense of himself is automatically going to make it look like he is wrong and he's the abuser. And, luckily, thankfully for him, he removed himself from that situation, and he went to the authorities, and they had a lot of stuff on tape and all that. But it's important to shed light on the fact that it's not just women that can be, abused by someone physically or any other way. If I took a guess, I would say that when it comes to domestic violence for men, it's probably more verbal and emotional. And you know what? Sometimes that hurts more than the physical stuff. I just think it's important to be so conscious about everything that you say and everything that you allow yourself to receive from people. There's an old folk saying, my grandmother used to say, nip it in the bud. And it means so much more to me now than it meant back then, that you have to.
Right. So, as we're speaking about moving from survivor to thriver, mm-hmm. you were saying about, opening your mouth and sharing, and you got to get it out. Mm-hmm. A lot of times I think we get stuck. I've seen a lot of people, because, it's men and women, get stuck in a survivor space. And in that space, a lot of times they're telling their story. They're on platforms, speaking, sharing the story. This is what happened to me. I'm not there anymore. I've survived. And for you, how did you notice a change in the way you shared your story, or in the way that you presented your story when you truly healed and became the thriver versus the survivor?
That's the word right there, is healed. I know that this time last year, I couldn't say a whole lot, because if I did, I would be speaking out of, the freshness of everything. I would be speaking more out of the hurt, the resentment, and the anger. So I needed to do some. Now, I did come out and say some things, and I didn't have a choice. I had to. If your jaw is wired shut and you're going to, casting agencies, and you're going to auditions, and you're in front of people with this very evident damage, you have to give a statement. So I did, but I tried to be as careful as I could about it, but I also couldn't BS around. I can't just say I slipped and fell. Even if that was the absolute truth, that in the middle of an altercation, I really did fall and I fell wrong, because these things happen. And unfortunately, again, because I had a concussion, I was very little that I could say. But anyway, I tried to make sure that I didn't say much during that time. And I actually had to hold off on a publication that I was working on, because ironically, I was a part of a magazine, and it was an inaugural issue too. And the magazine is called The Brilliant Awakening. And it's a story about hope and thriving from just all kinds of bad situations. And I remember talking to the publisher at that time, and I had to wait before I could even write anything, because when you're right there in the thick of it, you could do and say some things that are really damaging. I think it's important to focus on yourself. We can go back and rehearse and cry about what's been done to you. And after a while, it's just going to look like you're just trying to get attention and glorify that bad situation. Yes, it happened. I think you should talk about it. It has its place. But I really feel like the main focus should be healing. So I went into very intensive therapy. I kind of went into a cocoon. I worked when I had to. Of course, I have 4 children to take care of, so I still had to get on stage. I still had to get in front of the camera. Still had to go to the office sometimes. But I focused on really intensive therapy. I had to separate myself from a lot of people because there were a lot of people trying to get me to take revenge. And then there were a lot of people who didn't understand. Just a lot of people are going to get more, I think, emotional about the situation than you after it's all said and done. So I needed to focus on time with my pastor, time with my therapist, time with myself. I had to ask myself a whole lot of questions. Introspection was major, and healing. So, a year later from the very last experience that I'll ever have with domestic violence, now I'm in a space where I know that I'm healthy. I know that I have forgiven you know, anyone in my life from the past that's caused me any, you know, the psychological, the physical, the emotional. And I mean, when I tell you, I went through a lot with a couple of partners. And I think when the incident happened last year, it caused me to look at everything in my life that led up to that point. All the other things that I accepted and I took and I stayed in for way too long. Rather than you're supposed to be. So it caused me to go back through all that, and I had to forgive. And that, like, I'm emotional even thinking about it and trying not to cry, because forgiving is super hard, especially when you have to forgive someone and accept an apology that you will probably never receive. And from some of these people, one in particular, he's dead. I'm never going to get it. I'm sorry. So being able to be at peace with your entire story, even if you can't make sense of it all right away, and just heal.
Right, exactly. And I think, you know, for those who are watching, if you're saying, you know, well, how do I know if I'm a survivor or if I'm a thriver? You know, how do I know if I've healed? I think she just gave you the honest truth, in that if when you're speaking from a place of anger, you're speaking from a place of those feelings, those emotions. If you're speaking from a place of, look at me, look what they did to me, like, you know, if you're seeking that attention from it, you're in a place of survival. Yes, you're out of the violence, you're out of the abuse, but right. You are trapped and you are stuck. And the only way to get to the other side, where you can speak from a place of, let me help somebody, you know, right. Let me help save a life, and let me show you the glory that came from this, and the greatness that I am now, and as a place of really where you can look within yourself and you can see within yourself what you have done to yourself. You know, it takes help. It takes the therapy. It takes the pastor, you know, the real pastor. We're not going to go on there right now, but y'all know what I'm saying.
Shout out to Pastor Charles Martin, Champions Church. My pastor, Bishop Martin, is the real deal, Holyfield.
There you go. It takes that. You know what I'm saying? It takes the removing yourself from friends who are trying to hype you up, who are, you know, I'm gonna go get him. No, sit down somewhere, boo. Like, we ain't even trying to do that right now. We working on me. We gonna heal me, and you know, whatever is to come to them, the universe will take care of them. You know, and I'm not saying don't file for the restraining order, or I'm not saying don't file the police documents and let the court handle things. I'm talking about that, you know, payback. Don't let that go. Like that's not, you just gonna become the abuser now, and we don't need that cycle to start and begin in a manner.
Right. That's a whole another conversation.
Whole another conversation. But I just think that, you know, you said so many key pieces to that, because a lot of times, you know, people do, like, they're telling their story and they're breaking down in tears, and you're like, oh my gosh, did this happen yesterday? And they're like, oh, 20 years ago. Wait a minute. Why is there so much emotion? And it's because that they're still in the emotion of it, and they haven't healed from it. And it's still an open wound, and they are just picking at it every time they tell their story. And that's the difference. And that's what we've all got to do, is heal that wound. But before we end this, I mean, I think that you have like hit all the key points and the important parts. But before we end it, I want to give you the opportunity to say whatever's on your heart, whatever you feel somebody needs to hear right now, to that woman or that man who is stuck in survival.
I'm going to wait until, okay, here we go. I see you. Okay.
You know, the internet is the internet, and we just going to say that is that. Tell me the last thing you heard.
I heard you saying that you wanted me to, if I have anything else to say, to share that before we go. Okay.
Okay, yes. So I just want you to share whatever is on your heart, whatever, just whatever you feel like that survivor needs to hear, so that they can begin to do the process to really thriving.
Yeah. So if you're in this, if a person is in that space of, you know, look at what he did to me, or look at what that person or she did to me, it is because they're still seeking this validation. And I want to honor that space that you're in, because first of all, if you're in that survival space, I honor you. You, whatever it was, you survived it, whether it was physical, mental, whatever, you're still here. And that is to be celebrated. And if you're watching this, then that means that you have the presence of mind that you actually want to move through that space to that thriving space, to that healed space. So I just congratulate you. And I just want to share with you that it is okay to feel exactly what you're feeling, because it's a process. But go through it. Don't stay in that space of rehearsing and repeating whatever it is that happened to you. I'll give you a quick, less than 30-second run through. Everybody's got a story. I could still be like, man, but he raped me. He was raping me repeatedly when I was a teenager. Man, this person that I trusted and I thought was, you know, going to be protect me and love me has said some of the worst things that anybody's ever said to me. And he was my own flesh and blood. Told me that one time I should have died. Man, you know, this boyfriend, he was so rough with me on a regular basis, and his anger was just out of control. Oh my God, this husband, you know, would leave guns out, and he would say things that were mean, and he was controlling. He was miserable. He tried to make my life miserable. He tried to sabotage me after I left him. Man, I got into it with this, you know, partner, and I ended up with 9 stitches in my face, and I thought I would never be able to get on in front of a camera again. And your story could be way worse than that. But what I'm saying is, we all have a story, and I could go around rehearsing it and rehearsing it and rehearsing it. But everything you put out, you get back. So do I want that back? No. So I'm not going to keep reverberating that for no reason. It's got a time and a place. Whatever you're feeling, it's okay to feel that. It's natural. Just stay in the flow toward healing. Get all the help that you need. When it comes, of course, your safety and your well-being is always number one, man or woman. And then it's not all about your healing. It's about the other person's healing as well. So give them that space that they need to heal and get better. Forgive. And only you know, I'm not saying to reconcile, because every situation doesn't deserve that, especially if a person is putting their hands on you. But if you're in a marriage, or if you're in a situation where it hasn't got into a situation where it's causing you physical harm, and you feel like that's something that needs to be reconciled, which I'm not encouraging you to do, then be smart about it. Get counseling. Make sure that other person is committed to counseling and becoming better, because we all can change. We all can evolve. We all can get better. And if you're the person that is causing harm in any kind of way to your, you know, significant other, if you're watching this, that means you also have the presence of mind to be better. So I encourage you to stay on that path toward healing and focus on that. Focus on being the best version of yourself that you can. Just remember that everything you put out, you get back. Every single thing. We have to make an account for it here. And then if you're a spiritual person, you know that you're going to have to give account for it somewhere else as well. So I guess that's it for now. I really appreciate being on this platform.
Oh no, I thoroughly appreciate you saying yes and you sharing your story. You know, I definitely know that there is a woman out there, a woman who, you know, is like you, who is singing, who's acting, who's trying to build that career, and she feels this shame and this dark cloud and thinks she can't do it because of what she's been through or what she's going through. And so you just standing up and saying, I've been there, but I'm still here, and I'm still pursuing my goals and my dreams, and my passion is all she needs right now in this moment. So I want to thank you for that, definitely. And of course, before we end out, I just want to remind you to share, and invite your friends to bit.ly/pink-turns-purple. And of course, if you feel so inclined to help us in our plight of making a difference in the African American community, those specifically affected by violence, please feel free to donate, buy a tea and book combo. Let's make a difference in the lives of others across the world, especially in our community, right? So until next time, it is her, she, me, your girl mission for pink, and that is the Thriver, Nicole. And all we want to say is bye-bye.
And thank you.